Okay, welcome. Welcome to the show, Jason. How are you doing today?
Doing good, brother. Long time no see, man.
Yes, so to give the viewers some context, I met Jason in 2018 in Thailand in an international Buddhist monastery.
hmm
So, yeah, it's been a long time. You've changed, I've changed. You also know Dr. Rob. I think the viewers are going to find
Yeah,
that very interesting.
quite intimately, actually.
Yeah, he
I'm
met.
way better actually than I know you. We actually spent a lot of time together because we were ordained together and traveling around together. You got a little taste of what it's like to travel around with Dr. Rob, so we can compare.
Yeah, so tell me about that. Tell me about your experiences being a monk with him. How long have you known him for? How long have you been a monk with him? Tell us some stories.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did about 15 months total as a Theravada monk, and I had originally ordained in Sri Lanka. So and I guess I'm gonna give a little bit of a backstory just so people have a rough idea of where I'm coming from, because probably people think, okay, there's a white dude became a monk, but there's like I was raised in a Hindu ashram, so I was already raised on the eastern side of things. Both my parents were hippies. The first 5 years of my life were actually in a Kashmir Shivite ashram, which was Muktananda's, that then became Guru Mai's. And then we moved to LA when I was 5, did a lot of Native American Vision Quest stuff like that. My mom used to organize different spiritual teachers from India coming over to LA and stuff like that. Um, and so I was always exposed to this stuff. I was always into it. Um, I ended up leaving everything when I was like 24 and did the 10-day Vipassana retreats, the and Goenka ones back to back for about a year straight. I would sit one course, serve two, my mid 20s. And then after that, I decided to go back to college because I was thinking I might want to become a Buddhist chaplain at the time. So I finished my bachelor's, and my plan was to go into the master's program of divinity, but decided it wasn't for me. And then ended up falling in love with a Korean girl. So I taught English in Korea for a year, and that got me abroad. And then when I was traveling, I ended up going to Sri Lanka to actually see my Sri Lankan nanny, who basically raised me from the time I was 5 to 16. And so I had originally gone there for her, not even for Buddhism or anything else. And when I went there, because after spending a year at the Vipassana Center, I became familiar with the Sri Lankan monks in Los Angeles because I was familiar with Sri Lankan people because of my nanny. So it was just kind of a natural flow into that. And because I knew who I was already, I was able to ordain in a tradition that's never ordained a Westerner before. And then there was a Sri Lankan monastery there, and mostly mostly taking after the Thai tradition. And so, because I don't know if you know the history of Buddhism in Sri Lanka, where it was completely wiped out after the British. They destroyed all Buddhism, and then it was kind of repopulated. So people either from Thailand or Myanmar came. So the north tends to be more influenced from Myanmar or Burma. South tends to be a little bit more from Thailand. So just to make a distinction there. Um, but they ended up ordaining me, and I stayed there and just basically studied and meditated on my own, except for um, the head master of the monastery and maybe like a couple other people. No one really spoke English. They kind of put me in my own little building, and I just did my own thing for about 6 months. And they were always like, it's funny because I bring up visas. They're like, "Oh, don't worry about the visa. We got you. It's not going to matter. You're going to be fine." And it's like a month before my visa expires. I'm like, "Hey guys, what are we doing?" I'm like, and they're like, "Oh, we can't do anything." It's like, great. These guys, it's one of those like, everything's gonna be fine. Don't worry about it. And then when it shows up, they're like, "Oh yeah, you probably should have worried about that. Thanks." Um, but it was actually like a blessing in disguise because it basically sent me out of Sri Lanka, which I had planned to just stay there before. And and when it sent me out, I ended up going to Thailand. I got to stay in the basically the Thai palace where the last patriarch, I always forget his name, but the same like they have the Dalai Lama in Tibetan Buddhism, they have the Dalai Lama more or less of Tibetan Thai Buddhism as well. And so they have like a giant, it's almost like a Buddhist theme park. It's a trip. And they have like the forest monks up in the mountains, and then they have the local monks that are like the city monks that are just down there in the bottom and doing their thing. And I was part of the forest monks, and but they would, you go down to this palace looking thing, and they're bringing me cheeseburgers and pizzas and stuff for the monks because they want to like gain merit by making the Western monk happy, and it was so surreal. There's been a couple of times when I was a monk that it was beyond surreal, but yeah, I loved it, and I basically did that for about a month, and then I had a friend hit me up on Messenger, was like, "Hey, come to Burma, come check out and see what we got going on over here." I was like, "Okay, great." Um, and so basically, off of one guy who I never met off of Facebook, inviting me over to Myanmar, I went, and I show up. It's like the dead of night. They pick me up in a van and drive me out, and it's all dirt streets. It's all bumpy, and I get out, and it's basically like completely impoverished, just homeless people. I'm just like, oh my god, what did I get myself into? And mosquitoes everywhere. I mean, it was pretty bad, and it was such a shock to go from literally a palace to complete poverty in the course of this month. It was so extreme on both sides, and I ended up spending the night there, and then woke up and ended up talking and meeting Theodore Otomasara, the teacher that obviously Dr. Rob follows. I'm not going to call him that. Rob follows. Robert follows. Yeah. And so, yeah, and it was so interesting because he, very soft spoken in a lot of ways, very stoic. I mean, just, I didn't know what to make of him. I just thought maybe he's just, kind of a zoned out monk, which is how I kind of feel about some of them. And, but he ended up inviting me on one of his pilgrimages, basically, where they go all around Myanmar. And, we all piled in basically. And I thought it was just kind of me and maybe one other people. He travels with a posse. I mean, when he travels, he's got, 10, 15 people going. And so we all went on this crazy trip. And, they didn't tell me that he was basically an ascetic. Barely ate, doesn't sleep, basically, except if you're in a car. And I'm too big to sleep in a car or a boat. I mean, half the places they'd never seen foreigners before when we went there. They were coming up to me and petting my arm hair because they were just like, what is this hairy white dude? Like, it was, and I'm 6'7". I'm a giant dude. I'm 6'7". I'm probably about 260. So walking around as a giant white dude, they were quite in awe. But it was just funny. And then we had Rob there too, and we were going around, and I ended up getting extremely sick to the point of like almost dying. Basically from not eating and the food just not being, what I was used to. Probably not the cleanest either. But you eat what you're offered and you try to make do. That's what I did. And I got so sick I had to fly back to Yangon. And Theodore ended up coming with me. And it was actually from that discussion that he basically offered to fly me all over the world with him. And so I literally traveled after, I guess it would have been like 8 months into being a monk, traveling all over the world with Theodore, and we got to go on all these crazy adventures. We went through Malaysia into Singapore, I was in Vietnam. We went a coast-to-coast trip in the U.S., which, by the way, is one of the craziest stories. He has this thing where he likes to ordain like drug addicts sometimes, just try to get them clean and like go. And we were in a small car with two, people that were extreme drug addicts trying to detox and alcoholics, and it was an adventure. We went to Europe as well, London, 3 months in Italy. I mean, it was an adventure, man. And we ended up doing all that. And, Rob basically was there for the majority of it too. I think he went to India at some point during the end, and we kind of separated there. But yeah, that's basically the really rough story. Probably that brings up more questions than answers, but ask away.
Yeah, so I think Rob said that he went to India, and then he had some crazy experience there in the Mahakum. Is that when you guys left? Is that when you separated?
Yeah, I think so. He's been to India a couple times though, so I'm not sure if that was the exact one, because I believe he was going back and forth quite a bit. But yeah, more or less.
And then I think I remember him saying that he kind of kept you from disrobing. He kept you being a monk. Was that true? Did you
Yeah, I think I was more likely. I don't think it was really so much that he kept me. I think having a friend, because he was going through shit too. Between the both of us, he's got a bit of a temper, and he was like, it's funny because he would be like raging and freaking out about stuff 9 times out of 10. but I was also kind of, we shared different issues, you know. Me and him were like similar to you, like we're very different, I think, in terms of what we struggle with. Um, and and it was just, I think him being there, man. He was the only other Westerner, right? So me and him were like the only people we had to talk to,
Mm.
right, for the most part. And me and him are like on opposite spectrums. Um, Not so much like, I mean, I think we're both, believe as a foundation of non-duality, and at the time, especially just Buddhist non-duality, and kind of being on the same page about that, which is what kind of the friendship was kind of based on there. Um, but it wasn't so much that he kept me as it was that I think we just had someone else going through the same stuff from, a Western background, man, because it was kind of me and him, you know, and then a bunch of crazy, Burmese monks that we can't really communicate with.
So why did you end up disrobing?
Um, Well, a lot of it, celibacy is not extremely hard for me. I've always been very high sex drive, very high testosterone, and I had had enough. I couldn't do it anymore, really. But also, too, I don't really think it's my path either. I think I've always jumped in with both feet, do the best you can, experience you can, but I just don't think that at some point it got stale where the growth that I felt I was gaining from it. I'm sure even similar to probably Rob. Um, that when you're there and you just realize you're doing the same thing and you have time to meditate, but there wasn't as much of a push to grow. Almost, I felt like, after a certain period of time, and just being alone and kind of wandering on your own and meditating and stuff, it just kind of got old. um where it was like I kind of felt like I got what I needed to get from it, and like I said, the celibacy was very difficult for me. um and so it was just time to move on.
So seeing Rob now versus when you were a monk, seeing him doing these things online, what do you make of it?
Well, I don't know how much of it is like you're putting on a show for the audience and how much of it's real between the two of you. I mean, I've been watching a little bit just because it's so entertaining for me, because you guys are so on opposite sides, like, in my mind, like kind of similar but such opposite sides, kind of like me and him were. I mean, but for different reasons. Like, I feel like you're much more of a moral purist, and he's more of like, his whole thing is like more like the Zen non-dual monk, that there's no rules, and he wants to be kind of like the crazy fool for God, or however you want to put it, like breaking all social norms and all this sort of stuff. And he believes that that's kind of like what an enlightened being looks like for him, is being someone that's free from constraints and all the rules. Um, and I can get how even with Cioto stuff, it's kind of similar to that, where it's not rule based. It's a lot of working on just with identity, and that you're not the body, and that you're not identifying with things and freeing yourself from that. And there's a certain merit to that, and that's kind of what he's focused on. Um, well, I feel like looking at you, you're much more of a moral purist. There's, I think, a way in which you become pure in your mind. There's very strict morals of things to do and not to do, not eating meat being one of the big ones for you. And I just, I respect both of them. I mean, the thing is that I think I like both of you in some ways, because there's just not many people that are willing, whatever their spiritual path is, to fully go all in. And I've been someone that's kind of done that in my own way. And both of you are one of the, I mean, having traveled, I mean, for all that time, and even online, I mean, one of you guys are like some of the few that I've met that are Westerners that are sincerely trying to grow spiritually, regardless of your difference in beliefs. And I think that's commendable on both sides.
So you sent me a message. I thought it was very interesting that you basically said you kind of left Buddhism and now you're following Kashmir Shaivism, and you think that's
Yeah.
the truth.
Um,
So yeah, tell me
well,
about that.
I've always been a hybrid. I'll start off with, I've always been a hybrid because I was raised in a Kashmir Shaivite ashram. And I've kind of studied every philosophy from Western to Eastern, um, and back again. And a lot of it, I mean, I had a major shift. This is all kind of recent. I'm still processing it a bit, but you know, like, in terms of how to say this. The big shift for me was just understanding the role of desire. I think in Buddhism, desire and craving is core to everything. The reason you exist is because of craving. All suffering is because of craving and desire. And I think for a long time, especially with a strong Vipassana background, like that's a very black and white, simple explanation that it's very easy to go really hard on, and it makes sense, right? Simplicity, and that's what I loved for a long time was just the simplicity of it. You're suffering because you have craving. Get rid of the craving. You're going to get better. Great, like that's wonderful. And then I think I pushed to get as pure and cravingless as I possibly could, and not only did I find it to be kind of a bottomless pit in terms of there's always more craving, there's always something, and I think a lot of it's built into psychology and motivation as well. So when you start unraveling a lot of that stuff, you're kind of I didn't find it as deep a pursuit anymore. I really don't. I think a lot of desires and what you think, same as your thoughts, are more on the level of something superficial you identify with. In the same way your thoughts just come and go and they're not really you, I think desire is kind of similar. And I didn't find it to be the core of my causing my existence and where I'm at and all this stuff. Like that's kind of what's more proposed and pushed on the Buddhist side. That was the big shift for me. And I started to realize that I think that it is, I believe in monism that there's only one fundamental substance, call it God or whatever, that everything is made out of. I've always believed that to some degree. Um, and I think there's even Buddhist branches. I mean, Buddhism actually, the main issue that Buddhism takes with Hinduism is the idea of the soul. Buddhism basically doesn't believe in a soul, and in Hinduism they do. That's one of the big kind of foundational disagreements between Buddhism and Hinduism. I believe Buddhism kind of grew out of the fact that in India you had all these warring tribes with different religions trying to kill each other, and the Buddha said, well, let's just focus on the mind. Let's work on the mind. Let's not focus on all these different gods and goddesses or whatever. Let's make it simple. That's what he did. I think it was effective for the time, and that's great. But I've always also studied a lot of esoteric philosophy. I've studied theosophy quite deeply as well. Different chakras, different bodies. There's a lot of stuff like that too that I've gone into. And it's just, I found it to be more, Kashmir Shaivism to be more accurate in terms of reality. I'm after truth. I'm not trying to be right. I really try to go as in deep into my experiential reality, think with my own mind, with as piercing and penetrating a view as I can, and understanding that I can, while staying based in what is real, what is true, that I can verify with my own experience and work from there. And that brought me to Kashmir Shaivism. And a lot of it has to do with that. It's mostly about, consciousness. And I mean, in terms of Shiva does 5 things according to Kashmir Shaivism: creates, sustains, destroys, and the expansion and the constriction of consciousness. Those are the 5 qualities. And I think seeing those 5 qualities in all things and all beings makes me believe that that's basically how it works. And then, this is a very external world and a very physical world, and there's subtler worlds you can go to that are within me. And I've experienced the entire universe within my body, and seen it firsthand. So there's not really any doubt for me. It's not speculative. I've had a lot more also too, probably similar to you because you've, your dedication. I mean, had a lot of most people call them supernatural experiences. I think they're natural, but supernatural is what they would call them. But yeah, so that's where I ended up at.
So, do you know anything about Kailash?
I know that it's considered to be a sacred space, and particularly linked to Shiva. Yeah, that's about it. I know you went there.
Yeah. I heard about, or I first learned about Kailash from Sadhguru, and just something sparked. I knew that was a very powerful spiritual place. And I ended up going there in 2023. So the reason why I'm asking is because we're planning to make a trip again this summer. We'll see if it happens or not, but that's my intention at least. And you're invited. You're welcome to go. That is considered the home of Shiva. So no better place to learn about him than there.
Yeah. Well, I would say the best place to learn about them is within yourself, and that's where I tend to go. You know, I'm not. This is, I think, something for me, man. In terms of places, things, anything external to me is all projection. That's how I see it. You know, I think that the in your room can be just as, you know, I I say that, but also too, there is like, how to say, I think there is some sort of objective conscious where we can walk in different spaces too, but I don't think that any of it's necessary, I guess is how I could put it. You know, and that's kind of, even for me, like I grew up growing up in Los Angeles, right? There's so much new age stuff, crystals, this and that, spiritual thing, this ritual, that ritual. I'm so anti all that stuff. I can't stand any of it for the most part. I still want to go to Kailash before I die, just for the fact of seeing and having the experience of being there, because it's a sacred space. But I don't view it as something linked directly to any sort of spiritual, you know, progression. I would say personally, but um, yeah. And I think the other thing, you know, it's funny because we didn't talk for quite a while. I remember the one thing. I don't know where you're at with this, but you were collecting mercury for quite a time. Whatever happened with that? Do you remember this? This is one of the last conversations. I almost stopped talking to you. I don't know. I never told you this, but the main reason is because you started collecting mercury, and you're like, mercury is the greatest thing, and this is what's spiritually. And I was like, you know what, man, there might be too much difference here. I don't know if I can work with this anymore, man. You might have gone off the deep end, buddy.
Yeah, I definitely did go off the deep end, and mercury definitely is one of the most potent spiritual substances on planet Earth, from what I see. This is solidified mercury. If you were to hold it in your hand, it'd be extremely dense, and the density makes it so that you can put energy into it, and it stores it for a long time and doesn't go away. So it also has lots of healing properties if you know how to work with it. But at the time when I first found it, it was so satiating to me. It was just something that I couldn't get enough of, and I couldn't stop raving about it. Now
Yeah.
now I have kilograms of mercury, so things have kind of settled down. But
Do you take it with you? Like, are you traveling with it and stuff?
well, it's not liquid, so it's just a piece of metal. It's made into a solid shape, but it is 99%
Oh,
that metal.
hmm, interesting.
So what else? What else do you wish to share? Anything else? Any questions? Anything about Dr. Rob or Shiva?
Well, I'm just curious because I'm, you know, obviously a third party that knows both of you a little bit. Even though I feel like I honestly don't know you as well, I make less. I feel less strong about making any claim about you specifically, just because we did meet just for a short period of time. Then it's been quite a while. Um, but I mean, you. What is your take with you and Rob? I mean, what is that? Has that been beneficial for you? How do you feel about that whole dynamic? Because it's been, I mean, entertaining. I mean, I was watching. What was it? It was like a couple days ago where someone donated to you, and he's just freaking out. It was honestly, I thought it was hilarious. Like, I mean, you did too, obviously, but I was like, Jesus, man, what are these people coming to here?
Yeah, yeah. People are asking me about that, and if is it real? Am I benefiting from it? Why am I spending time with him? And honestly, I don't have a good answer. I'm just going with the flow. It seems enjoyable. I'm experiencing some pleasant sensations from it, and that's as far as it goes. Um, but yeah, we're not planning anything. We're not, writing scripts on how these live streams go or anything. It's just how it goes. We have conflicts with each other, genuine conflict, and I guess that's interesting and inspiring to some people. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I don't know. Just wanted to see it play out. I mean, both of you kind of decided that you want to go kind of the spiritual teacher route on. That's kind of and grow the YouTube and go that way and make a living. I mean, the live streaming thing I never really considered, but it seems like it's working for you, huh?
yeah.
It's being a way to actually interact with people. It's kind of interesting. I guess I wouldn't consider that. I wouldn't consider that to be a real way to, I don't know, make a living, I guess, right? But it seems to be,
Well, I mean, you see
possible.
streamers now like I Show Speed and all these young guys coming up. They're making millions of dollars live streaming. So live streaming is the way to go. This is like the upward trend of live streaming. and soon everybody's going to be live streaming and their mother. So get in while it's still fresh, if you want.
Yeah, I think for me, I still wanted to kind of establish myself a bit more and have enough money because if I end up going back over to India or doing whatever, I want to be able to have a solid year where I don't have to worry about anything and just focus on that. Um, I think one of the big differences is I've always been a lot more of a warrior and being a warrior type. Like I kind of more identify with being like a Kshatriya than a Brahmin. I always felt both of you are very more Brahmin than Kshatriya, and that's I think been a big difference. Like I don't know if you know this about me, but I wanted to be a pro MMA fighter out of high school. From 16 to 24, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and fighting was basically all I did. Um, I've been a bouncer most of my life. Like I said, I'm giant, and I think it's kind of shifted my mentality quite a bit because of that. I just always wanted to try different things. I think I tried. I don't know. I had a channel called Humble Stature for a while. I actually ended up interviewing Rob when he was still a monk back in the day, and I ended up what else? Doing a number of other things, different people, and tried it, but I didn't really like how it solidified me. I felt like I was still growing and wanted to discover and grow on my own. And I had to take on a teacher position that felt like counter to my goals. Right. My goal was to go and get as deep and insightful and as much knowledge as I could, but I kept becoming like the teacher or the mediator. And I was just like, I don't, this isn't very fulfilling for me anymore. So I stopped doing that. Also had a very bad break. Well, not very bad. I mean, I could still talk to the guy, but originally I moved to Greenville to start doing a YouTube and want to do it full time with another YouTuber. And basically, how do I explain this? I don't want to give away too much, but there's basically a situation between us and his. I don't want to say that. Anyway, there was basically a situation, and it basically ended our friendship, more or less. And that was basically pretty soon after I ended up moving here alone to try to do all this with him. And so that's how I ended up getting in Greenville from Los Angeles. Also, too, I wanted to get out of Los Angeles because of lockdowns and all this other stuff. And so there was that. But yeah, and also too during the time, I mean, it was kind of Trump was starting to rise up and all this stuff. I was always more conservative. That was a big. Rob's very liberal, and me and him would just go to war over some of those things. What else? Yeah, not so much in the fact that I get into all the weeds, but I kind of started from philosophy. I just believe in minimal government. I think having a big, federal government that has all this power is just prone to abuse. I don't like big cities. I don't like big governments. I think they're all, by nature, prone to deep corruption. And so that was kind of my position than anything particularly. I don't have a bone to pick per se with like abortion, which tends to be like a big one for liberals. That's not really an issue for me. I think it's kind of both bad either way. I don't care. So it was built around that. I mean, it was called the spiritual right. I liked how it was kind of a play on words, both because it's right and then also just being correct and doing all that. But yeah, I think I've gone from being more like a straight kind of more Theravada with a little bit of the Hindu esoteric stuff thrown in to kind of just going on the more of the other side of tantric Kashmir Shaivism. But I don't, the funny thing is I don't even like most tantric teachers or most like non-dual teachers for that matter. I think most of it is a lot of smoke and mirrors. I don't think they're usually either talking from experience or it's a lot of just playing linguistic games in which they are not even close to realize, but you can tell like you realize really easy with that stuff. I mean, if you learn the right lingo, it's very easy to just trick someone and think, oh, I'm so beyond all this, I'm non-dual, and it's like you're just, you're spiritual bypassing and avoiding your life. That's really what you're doing. And I kind of seen it all. I think because I grew up in Los Angeles, just seeing so many fake gurus, fake spirituality, people thinking they're so high because of whatever XYZ thing. I find it all distasteful. And I've kind of just been always on my own, and I guess I'll throw in a little bit too, like besides even all the other stuff I mentioned, I did Native American Vision Quest as a teenager. No food, no water. Going out there, got that whole rite of passage. Sweat lodges. I mean, what else did I get into? Yeah, studying theosophy, all the other stuff in college, where I ended up going pretty deep into studying a whole bunch of different philosophies as well, trying to figure out what relates directly to the experience. Different energy teachers. I grew up around a lot of supernatural type of teachers with different abilities, whether it be remote viewing or other stuff. So I got exposed to all that world too. But I just don't really. I think my main teachers now would be a combination of, I don't know if you've heard of these people, but probably Dr. David R. Hawkins would be number one in my mind. Pure Power versus Force and Letting Go. He was legit. Julius Evola is one of my favorites, probably the most controversial one. I don't know if you've probably never even heard of him. He wrote a book called The Doctrine of Awakening. He was kind of like, it's like if you wanted a Buddhist warrior guide, it would be that book. I mean, he's such a hardcore, precise, like intense thinker. I just loved his energy. The thing is, he would kind of also grew up in Italy during the whole fascist regime, so there's like weird ties with that and Nazism, all that stuff. And if you read his Wikipedia, it's probably not going to be too flattering, but the guy was legit, and ironically managed to piss off both the fascists and the Nazis because he was just like, well, I just believe in spirituality, basically. Like, I believe there's a spiritual hierarchy, but it doesn't have to do with ethnic race, and other stuff like that. And so managed to get everyone mad at him, even though he got associated just by the fact he was born in fascist Italy and was around fascists because he was quite, his family was part of more of the elite. But he was quite a intellect. Probably he wrote a lot of books even by like 21 and was just very developed. So he's one of my favorites. Trying to think who else now. I guess those are two that come to mind right now.
What about Sadhguru? Do you study him, watch him?
I've watched some of his videos. I'm always I think as I grew up in the Hindu stuff and the big, I don't believe in gurudom. I really dislike anything where there's a guru, period. And the whole worshiping the guru and playing the guru and the whole Indian guru, non-starter for me. I'll take Nisargadatta Maharaj, the non-invited Vedanta teacher who basically lived in his basement smoking cigarettes. I think he was more enlightened than pretty much anyone else. And that whole thing. I think he's definitely not positive. I think he has a lot of wisdom. Most of the stuff I've heard from him has been quite good. But even that way they talk, the same thing. Like, I can't stand Osho. Osho, like, not to compare the two because Osho was so much worse. But it's that same kind of slow talking Indian like gurudom thing that is just no, wrong way. I'll pass.
Yeah, I used to consider myself to be a spiritual teacher. I thought of myself that way. I wanted to be on a pedestal and, have something to share. But after I realized that humbleness and humility is actually the more sensible and sane way to go. So I don't consider myself a spiritual teacher. If somebody sees me that way, that's their own issue. But primarily I identify myself as a spiritual seeker. And that's how it will go. As far as
That's
Sadhguru,
beautiful, man.
yeah, as far as Sadhguru goes and his style or his, I don't know, slowness, I like Sadhguru a lot. He changed my life, transformed my life when I was, in 2019. And yeah, he's built some amazing temples, some that you really should consider going at some point. And also in March time, I'm planning to go to India as well again. So you'll see some energy from there
Hmm.
on my YouTube channel.
Yeah. I mean, I like that. What is a giant Shiva statue he has that he built and all that other stuff.
Hmm.
He's done a lot of good. He's done a lot of good. I think it's just for me is what I as far as being, one of the biggest things for me is earnestness, being really sincere. I realize when you start going the spiritual path, most people are not sincere. They act sincere, they act like they want truth or whatever, they don't. Most people, it's all built on identity and reaffirming identification with the personality. And people usually choose a religion based off of what suits their personality the best and what reinforces whatever they already believe. And they just use it in order to feel good about themselves because you can get moral superiority, as you saw. Right? Moral posturing. I'm better than other people because I do more X moral thing and you don't. Therefore, I'm greater than you are. And that feels real good. And that's what most people use it for. And that's what the history of most religions is. I'm better than you are. And it just, I think that, there's a lot of fake because there is, a real spirituality, real divinity, real truth. Reality is a certain way, and you can discover it if you have the sincerity of heart, but most people don't. I mean, I remember being very young, like 10, and just realizing how dark the world actually is. And I remember thinking to myself, and very strongly, I would rather die than basically die, or I want to know God. I want to know what's actually true or why this is even here in the reality. Or I'd rather die because this place is not worth being in. Is how I felt about it. And that was like a core thing. And maybe that had partly to do, I mean, I grew up around spiritual seekers and a whole bunch of different stuff, when I was younger. And the question of like, why are you here? Who are you? Or just, I was asking these questions way younger than I probably should have been. I think it was a lot of cart before the horse. Because you can start thinking of yourself as like, even when I was younger, as being spiritual, you start having experiences and all this stuff. But you can't even hold down a job. And it's like, you got a ways to go, kid, looking back. But I think it definitely created a big, for me, spirituality is not optional. It's not a thing that I'm choosing. It's the search for truth and finding out who I am and what reality is, and that I'm going to die in however many years. And I think a lot of it is about expanding one's consciousness, and we're kind of like step-down transformers, and we're trying to expand the energy, both in our bodies and the subtle bodies. So, yeah.
You said that you consider yourself to be a warrior, a spiritual warrior, and not less of a Brahmin, but more of a warrior class. So who are you fighting?
I think it's the role in society, right? The Buddha was a warrior. He was born in the Kshatriya clan. They were a warrior clan tribe. That's what he was born into. That's what his father was. That's what he was taught. And he was taught archery. He was taught how to kill, taught how to fight, because that's part of being in that class. And that class is, even I think of kind of like even on the Western side where you had like the intellectuals where mind was kind of separate. Then you have people that are maybe very embodied. And it's all about fighting, but the combination between the two, being a warrior, another big example is Krishna. Krishna was a warrior of the Kshatriya, and he had to kill his family members and relatives, did he not? The Bhagavad Gita. So I think that this embodiment of the most brutal parts of life and becoming stronger and more capable is part of that mentality versus kind of like the priestly class, which at the time of both the Buddha and the time of even with Krishna, I mean, they're usually counterproductive. They're usually doing whatever the opposite is and teaching people this and that because it's not embodied. They read the books, they have the right words, but they don't have the lived experience or the inner work to match up to it. And that warriorness and that grittiness is kind of where I think there tends to be a bit of a disconnect between the spiritual world and the physical. I think it's about both and integrating and understanding both in their fullness. And so, I've been through so many brutal things. Now I sell cars, which is kind of, I mean, it's warrior-esque. You're going out there and making sales and all this. It's a different form, but it's in terms of, it's polite society and a job. Sales is very warrior-esque. You eat what you kill. You know what I mean? To some degree, it's tough. And before that, I was a firefighter. I mean, going to burning buildings and doing all that, that's warrior energy, and developing that. And actually, one of the things I want to talk to you the most that I was quite curious about was getting into the whole women thing, because I think that usually what ends up getting women is warrior energy. That's usually the distinction between whether women flock to you or they don't flock to you. And so, but yeah, that's what I mean by that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you about, we'll go into women in a moment, but I wanted to ask you about being a firefighter. What was that like? Have you actually had to go into buildings? Yeah, tell me about
Yeah.
that.
I mean, going through, because I am now, I went through this about a year and a half ago. Well, no, I guess it would have been started about 2.5 years ago. And I'm now 37. So I went through it like 30, 36, 35 or whatever, going through this. And I would have been 30. Yeah, because I turned 38 this year in June. So, but I had done a lot of bodybuilding. I was a personal trainer before that. And so I had a lot of more muscle. And going through a lot of this high cardio stuff with a bunch of 18-year-olds was brutal. And then not only that, but I'm getting yelled at because not only that, I'm in the South getting yelled at by a bunch of these drill sergeants. I mean, just absolutely despised me in every type of way. Um, was not fun. Wasn't fun at all. On top of that, about halfway through, I ended up pulling up my hamstring and almost had like no money to even live. I had to push through the entire thing. And then on top of that, my father almost ended up dying and almost basically ended up losing a large part of his ability to even function. He can't work anymore. And I got that news in that same time. So it was probably one of the worst times of my life going through that, to be honest. And then once you get to the actual station, you're done with boot camp. It was how do I say? We had some good fires and stuff, and dragging people out. And a lot of it though is people that are just too fat. You see just completely morbidly obese people that call you to pick them up all the time, and like almost like 30% of the calls are us picking up fat people, which is not fun, right? Um, there's some other brutal stuff. I mean, we had a double homicide, and they set the house on fire, and we're going in there and Satan. You see the corpses. I mean, when I was in, I think we did this together. I don't know if you remember. Actually, I think you were there when we first met at that monastery. I remember they actually had an open, what do you call it, where they burn the bodies? Open cremation, not cremation, funeral pile or whatever you call it. And you got to watch the bodies burn. I think you were there, were you not?
Yes, yes, I was there.
Yeah, yeah. And it was funny because a lot of that time, I thought back to that moment of here are these dead burned bodies, and same like back then, here's the dead burned body, and I think for that reason, it honestly psychically really protected me because it wasn't something new. It was something I got to sit with before I was ever a firefighter, and that was powerful. And there's other things like that I got to sit with, in terms of my own. I mean, I'm very secure in myself, especially now because I've been in so many environments, so many tests, so much difficulty. You know what I mean? That at this point, it's like none. It can't. I don't feel like I can be messed with. Almost, you're just like wonderful. Just moving forward, doing my thing, and life's good.
Yeah, when we were there in Thailand, they put up a body, some old person died, and the second that they lit the fire, every lay person just, they were gone. There's some belief in
Yeah,
Thailand that ghosts are gonna haunt you if, the spirit leaves the body. But I was so interested. That was the most curious I've ever been. Thank God that happened, and I've gotten witness a few more creations after that in Nepal. But yeah, you telling me the stories of you being a monk, I think that I'm much more averse base. I have much more aversion. So it seems to me you're the opposite. You're more craving based, just how I perceive
mm,
this. So even
sure.
though I like women and whatever, I had some experiences with women, I don't experience women the same way that I think a lot of men experience it. I find it quite averse and quite gross and repulsive, actually. And
Mm,
I've come to the stage of my life that I'm understand that this human form, this male body needs to be grown and developed, and I need to acquire resources. And if the right woman presents herself and this is appropriate and we want to get married and start a family, absolutely, that's what I'll do. But even things like fighting, I understand fighting is such an essential part of being a man, and you need to have a fighting mentality at the very least, let alone training martial arts and things like this, which I want to do in the future. Right now, I just don't, there's just no motivation for me to do that. because it seems that the only motivation I would do this with is, okay, I want women to like me, and I don't have that. So yeah.
I think for me, I've always, been someone that wants to go into the darkness. I believe that everything and most of the stuff that there is to grow is in the dark. It's in the gritty stuff, the sexual, the murderous, the whatever you call it, all that stuff, the powerless, the whatever. And I've always wanted to explore sexuality in all these different aspects. I've pretty much done everything. There's not much I haven't done, especially in terms of women and dating. And it's and from that I feel like I've gained a certain amount of wisdom, a certain amount of craving that I think was fed, but also too, I think my main vice has always been sexuality from the start. And my mentality was always to go more headfirst into it, rather than repress, or shy away or think it's bad or guilt or whatever. I think it was a kind of a radical acceptance, especially at this point. I'm not trying to be the purest, best good boy I can be. I'm not. I think it's dumb. I think that a lot of these people have this basic Christian view almost. Same as over here. If I'm just the best good boy, God's going to, take me to the good place and I'll be happy forever because I'm such a good boy. It's like, that's not how reality works. It's really not. And you can play that game all day long. It's just another rat race. I consider that to be the same rat race as the money thing. At least the money's more honest, though. At least the good boy rat race is usually unconscious and people just drive themselves crazy. It's like, oh, I'm so bad. I yelled or whatever it is, or it's just so ridiculous to me. I think, personality to me is personality, and you need to work on your personality in order to be able to function with other human beings, and you need to have control and discipline, inner discipline and stuff, but everyone has different personalities, and a lot of this stuff might be in self-acceptance, having certain tools when certain things come up so you can manage it. But once you have a manageable personality that you can function in the world, it's kind of irrelevant in terms of trying to work on a lot of that stuff. It really goes in the more good boy, bad boy type of category. And it's whether or not this is deepening awareness or not. And I think it's easy to put everything in the not deepening awareness, but 9 times out of 10, the stuff that you have to actually deal with is the ways in which you're unconscious. So even if I go into some of the sexual stuff, it may constrict my consciousness. I may be more obsessed with it or whatever, but that's what needs to be worked on. And staying in those spaces sometimes has brought me more awareness, not less. Especially in terms of awareness, like I don't like getting beat up. I don't get punched in the face. I don't like, you go to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu place and they're grinding you out and there's some guy sitting on your chest and you can't breathe and your arm's behind your back. You know what I mean? But to find peace in that is powerful, and that's kind of the more the mentality. It's not really about women. It's about having, for me, the freedom and the control. Right? I don't want to be limited. I can play a lot of different roles. And I've always been a bit of a chameleon in the sense that I really believe in the ability to fit into whatever situation freely. To me, that's consciousness freely expressing itself and not being conditioned. And the more conditioned you are to have to be a certain way, the less freedom you have. And so I rather go into the dark, express it, and like Shiva is the dark and the light and all of it. And I think when you're able to go into that and express it and feel it and without losing yourself, but stay aware in it, right? Because you can totally lose awareness and end up doing horrific things, right? But it's usually the horrific things happen because you've repressed something so much it comes up subconsciously, and all of a sudden you've done something you never thought you would do. That's how most horrific things happen for most normal people. It's all under the surface. They bottle up. They deny that it exists, right? Denial is so huge. Probably the hardest one. That's why humility is so important, because denial is probably the biggest and easiest thing for anyone to use to negate everything. So I rather be considered, like impure and go into all that stuff and figure it out and expand my awareness in it and be comfortable. I'm so comfortable in my sexuality, and I have a really lovely girl now that I'm seeing. I usually have like 3-4 women, and I've always had like multiple women pretty much for as long as I can remember. And in managing that, I've had loving relationships. I got this job because of a girl, but because basically it's a long story, but I'd gotten a job, and then I'm going to summarize it. I got a job, and 2 weeks into that job, a giant Helena hit over here and completely wiped it off the map. And I was jobless again after just getting a job. And because of this girl, she was like, hey, I'll make a phone call, makes a phone call. And all of a sudden I have a great job again. And I love the connections. I love meeting different women and different people and the intimacy. You can have intimacy so fast and so deep and get into someone's world and see all that. That's what I love about it. It's never been. It's like the lust is fine, but it gets kind of old to some degree too. And you can only do so much. Once you've kind of done everything, it's like, well, what else is there to do? It's the difference in connections and views and the ability. Like even if I meet someone on the street, you can't have a deep level of intimacy or opening up in a short period of time like you can with a woman. If you really are, and they like you, when you have that chemistry, it's it's so cool. It's probably the closest to being very spiritually open. And even orgasming with sexuality for a lot of people might be the highest thing they've ever experienced, which is something to keep in mind. Most people end up chasing it to the point of detriment because it's the highest point they've ever experienced is orgasm. But you realize there's more if you actually meditating and doing your spiritual work. But a lot of these things aren't exclusive. Even the Kashmir Shaivite tradition, a lot of it with the sexual tantra and this and stuff, it's all considered to be called all part of it. And that's also what's moved me more onto the Kashmir Shaivite side rather than the Buddhist side.
Yeah, I think it's very valid. I personally don't choose that. Um, yeah, it doesn't work with me as well. And I met some woman in Bali because I'm a man, I have hormones, and I was thinking maybe I need to do this. Maybe I'm missing out, and whatever. So I went out and I met her on the street, just kind of synchronistically. And we were talking, and things are progressing, and slowly, she's laying in my bed, and we're talking, and I just realized this is this is not going anywhere. This is not going to go anywhere. The best is we're gonna have
Mhm.
sex. We're gonna go and we're gonna experience each other's bodies. I'm gonna have all of her energy in me, and I'm gonna have to deal with that. And we're such different people, such different values, even though we're relatively similar, but still the lifestyle and the beliefs and the thoughts so different. Um, so it made me understand that the value, or at least what I want in my values, is I want a wife. I want a woman that will has the intention to make children with me and to go with me for a long time to whatever I'm building.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I think that's beautiful. I don't think you should be like me at all. Like, I'm not trying to say that. I think that, and this is a lot of has to do with your temperament and your personality and your beliefs. I could see you absolutely finding that. Honestly, I know Rob gives you such a hard time about it. I really don't. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to, especially being an Asia, a white dude, like, and I feel like you have a calming energy. I could absolutely see a girl that was, we'd have to find someone that was into that. Like, there's kind of, I guess you would call them almost like incel spiritual women in India. Like they exist. And I think like that would be your type, man, and more power to you. There's some people that love that. They want one person, they want to bond with that one person, and they want their values to match up. And like, you know, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Especially the only thing I think is if you, I think he sees it more as coping or as, I don't know, some sort of projection or something. I don't know, from what Rob was, giving you a hard time about. But I kind of feel like most of those girls that I've met, because I've been with all types of girls. I've been girls that virgins and weren't anymore to like really sweet, spiritual. I mean, all over the place. And I think that, especially as you become more secure and you become successful and have a little. I don't think the money's going to be the big thing though. Anyway, I don't think it's usually about money, especially like the thing is, right. Look at your values, right? I mean, if someone has your values, is money really going to be their deciding factor whether or not they're with you? No, it's not even going to be a factor at all. So I won't even look at it as money because what it's going to be with you is going to be someone that's also very deeply spiritual and like fully committed in that sense. And you guys are fully in that path together. That's what it's going to look like. Or it wouldn't work anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see how it works out. But yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm glad that we reconnected. Um,
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting that we cross paths again through Rob, and maybe one day we'll live stream all together, all three of us on a beach somewhere. That would be nice.
Yeah, man. I think, like I said, give me some a little bit of time. I think it'd be fun. I definitely would give it a go.
Mhm.
Especially now. It just, when the time is right. Anyway,
So
thank you, Shiva.
before we finish, I wanted to ask, do you see any downsides or the negative effects of being, kind of a playboy, being with all these women? What are some downsides that you see?
Um, there's definitely downsides. It's funny because most of the downsides people kind of name are like STDs or stuff like that. But um, I feel like I don't know if I'm just lucky or I have good genetics or whatever. I've never gotten really anything. I think I had one thing that was curable before. Most things can be cured by a pill unless you got AIDS or something, or like some sort of certain forms of herpes. But nowadays too, the medication on that stuff is so good that even if those people usually get it, they can make it so it's not contagious. It's kind of crazy. Um, but psychologically, in terms of the energy, like you're mentioning, um, this is where I think my energy, this is the difference between a warrior energy and more of that Brahmin energy. Um, their energy doesn't go into me. My energy goes into them. There's, I, you know, it's, I'm a big believer that basically what you believe you're affected by. I grew up with a sister that was so afraid of everything, of this and that, and she's allergic to these things and whatever. I believe I'm not allergic to anything, and I'm not allergic to anything. I believe I'm not affected by temperature, and temperature doesn't affect me. I think this has to do with consciousness and the fact that generally your body's going to react to what you hold in mind. And so I've purified myself of those beliefs, and they don't affect me. And so this idea of like, I do view everything mostly in the mind in terms of mind as projection, even in terms of what you see if you look at Sadhguru or this or that, and oh, whatever, so divine. It's because you're projecting a divinity. I know it's not. It doesn't make it unreal, but I don't think people take responsibility for their own minds. Right? You're the source of everything. And so even for me, when I'm doing these sexual things, I'm seeing the sexual things and I'm interested in their stories and to be able to get to know them and stuff. And I never feel like our energy's mixed because I never stop sleeping with them and they're meditating all of a sudden. I just don't think our energies are like, and I think that we get influenced by the thoughts and the beliefs, and I'll talk about what I believe and maybe I'll, talk to them and stuff and they'll get influenced by this or that. But like in some ways too, like, and this is the warrior thing, I want to be tested. I like the test of it. Like put your energy on me. Have be a psycho woman. let's see, let's see what comes up. Because I'll tell you right now, it doesn't even phase me a bit. And a lot of that is because of all the experience and because of being able to see what is woman and what is me and what is them, and I don't take on them. You know, and I can appreciate them, and I don't think that when if we doing stuff sexually, and then now they're upset or this or that, it has anything to do with me because I'm very upfront. I don't lie to these women. I don't tell them, oh, I'm just with you, this and that. They all know. And I'm upfront, and they're usually fine because I don't know if you understand how the dating market works now, especially with apps and stuff. If you're in the top 5%, you get all the women. All the women want the best men, period. And women are the choosers, and they're more picky. So either you're in the top 5%, and women will sleep with you all the time and do whatever you want without you having to do anything. That's the top 5%. It doesn't even have to be money. It's a combination of money, looks, everything that basically makes up security. You know what I mean? To some degree. And then you have people that can't get laid unless they have a bunch of money because they're beta and they have to their energy is not enough. Their energy does not suffice for women to be turned on. So having a bunch of finances to sweeten that deal makes it worth it because maybe they're not attractive either too. It's a bit of a relative thing, but even the girls that are less attractive, all of them are shooting up. So unless you're basically like kind of like an 8 or above, you don't get anything. And then if you have enough money, they might settle for a 5 or a 6, depending on where you are on that masculine on the marketplace. Right? It's a marketplace. If you were the only man in town, your value would shoot through the roof, and everyone would want to sleep with you magically, right? But and then most of them are incels. Most men don't have sex. They don't get a bunch of women. They can't go out and bring a girl home that same night, and she'll do whatever she wants, and she's happy about it. And so it matters what category you're in. I mean, how they perceive you is everything. If they perceive you as a demigod walking out because you're a 6'7" ripped dude, is very different than if you walk out there and you're fucking, stubby, unkept, looking like a freaking, like you just jerked off 20 times, right? Like it's not the same energy. And women pick up on that. And I love the way that women interact with me generally. And I've done stuff that most men are like, how did you even do that, right? You walk and you meet a girl, and within the next 2 hours, she's in your bed, so happy to just be there. And you're just like, it's a Saturday. What do you expect? It's not always like that, but there's been times like that, and it's a great feeling, you know. Um, but I don't consider sex something to be dirty. I think the problem is most of it was women got pregnant, right? The reason why a lot of this stuff I feel historically they were so against sex is because if you have sex, you have a baby, and if you have a baby, you're responsible, buddy. You got a family, you got money, you got to pay now. I mean, that was a big no-no, even in terms of Buddhism. It's like you can't have you can't have a kid with a woman and then desert her. And now they were so against that. You got to realize there was no birth control, right? So that's where I think a lot of that comes from, and I think we're in a different age. And that age allows me to explore sexuality to the fullest with all the women that want to explore it with me. And I'm not apologetic about it. I'm not sorry. I have a great time. And, I think I've been getting more and more fulfilled by this one girl I have right now. I'm quite happy. So I stopped with a lot of the other women recently. But I also know that all that's subject to change. And I stay it's not that I'm not attached. I'm aware. I know that what it is could come and go, and people change, especially women I think are very unpredictable sometimes. You don't really know people. Like there's a lot of stuff under the surface. They have something trigger. Priorities can change. They can see something. Like I don't own other people. I don't control them. They can do what they wish. And and as clear as I can, I say who I am. If they want to interact with that, then we interact. If it's mutual, that's all there is to it. I view it more as just the ability to explore. Sexuality is probably one of the most core things to your identity, is it not? I mean, you might say it's not, but in terms of your identity is built on sexuality. A lot of the Freudian stuff, and whether or not you believe that everything Freud said is irrelevant. I was also in I made a PhD program for clinical psychology. I guess I should throw that out there too. I ended up doing a year, but then I realized, honestly, I didn't think it was legit, especially it wasn't really very academically rigorous as I wanted it to be, and I felt like I was wasting my money, so I stopped. But I did study Jung quite deeply for that reason, and Jung and Freud and all the other psychologists, and you realize, it's really true. Sexuality is basically at the core of your identity, which is why when that thing is off or something, it reframes everything.
What do you mean by that? By it's the identity? How is sexuality your identity? How is sexuality your identity?
Because sexuality is kind of like the innermost. How do I say it? Well, even in the Buddhist scriptures, they lay out the things in order of what's hardest and easiest to overcome. Sexuality is considered the hardest thing to overcome, which I would argue shows its more core. Even in terms of most religious traditions, see it as being one of the last things to go, even before liberation. There's stuff with other spiritual teachers we'll talk about, meeting the divine feminine, or Shakti comes and tries to take them away from their path. This deep sexuality that basically would burst us into existence. There's a very strong sexual creative force that has bursted all of us into existence. And that was the beginning. And because that was the beginning, sexuality is very core to identity, because a lot of it is that creative, wanting to be, exist, force, and to merge, and the two polarities, right? You're creating a polarity. And the most basic polarity psychically is masculine, feminine that arises. So it's just very core to your identity. And merging the two and integrating them and transcending and understanding how it's all one experientially and working through that, to me, is like a large part of, allowing your personality to allow the energy to flow through it, which is how I would phrase it, because I think it comes from the divine, ultimately. It's just a matter of whether or not it can be expressed through the physicality.
So being a 6'7" guy going into a nightclub, how is that for you? How would the women react? How do they respond to you?
The thing is, for me, I'm already kind of an odd guy, because the thing is, right, I am, even though I'm 6'7" and I'm big, it's I really hate clubs because they can't really talk to anybody. And my thing is more about the just being getting to know somebody. So usually you walk in, there might be someone that just looks at you like, I'm interested in that, right? And you just start talking to them. You might dance a little bit, and it's fun. You just met this hot girl. All of a sudden she wants to like grind on you and this and that. And you're like, This ain't bad. Hopefully then after that, you'll go somewhere else and get to talk to her. If she likes what you have to say, then she'll be like, I'm game. It's usually how it goes. But I don't, every time I walk in, it's like I just automatically get a lot of that. I honestly end up, unless, the thing for me is like, usually unless some people have some very deep suffering they've been through, I can't relate to you. Even with women. So a lot of people are just shallow. Like I can't even have a conversation with them. Like if they really are just some ditzy, dumb chick, like it won't go very far. I'll be very bored very fast. But there's a lot of very beautiful sexual people who are very deep also. And I love those people. That's my type. My type has always been, actually, to be honest, this kind of tracks is goth chicks. I mean, if we can start with that life is kind of, that there's been major suffering and pain, I have a starting point. You know what I mean? But the women that just live, the people that just live in the normal world, I can't relate to for the most part. There's just such a disconnect between I'm just, a monkey, like a sheep, right? I'm just a sheep and, or NPCs, right? Most people are just NPCs. It's so boring. But there's a lot of people that aren't, and usually it's triggered by some sort of massive suffering where they have to reflect on themselves, is where most people end up start on a spiritual path. And I had that too, massively. I mean, if I didn't believe in reincarnation, I would have been massively suicidal for a good portion of my life. But I think if I kill myself, I just come back. So what's the point? Probably in a worse situation. So I'm just going to avoid that altogether.
Well, with that being said, do you have any place that viewers can find you? Any kind of YouTube? You said you had a YouTube channel. Anything now that somebody wants to talk to you or learn from you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I haven't produced anything recently. I guess my Facebook is Jason Monty Rayom. Perhaps you can spell it out in the thing, And then I guess I have old stuff. Spiritual Right, Humble Stature is my Instagram with an underscore. But yeah, if someone wants to chat or something, another one of your friends reached out to me. I was gonna do a little thing with him too. I felt like because you asked me way before and I blew you off, that I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give it to Shiva first. I have to talk to you first before I talk to him out of respect.
Nice,
So.
nice. Yeah. I respect that.
So fair enough.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining me. I'm sure the viewers will find it very interesting, your story, especially with Dr. Rob and how this whole thing relates, and you definitely shared some interesting points. So we look forward to seeing your videos very soon.
Yeah, I'll do my best, man. Hopefully create something soon.
Thank you, Jason.
Anytime, man.
Take care. Bye.
See ya.